Security is headline news. It's no longer something that is limited just to us IT technical folks. It's part of the business conversation as attacks have gone up, and both in volume and in severity. And why is that? Well, one of the things that we're seeing is that the bad actors have been paying attention to the changes in technology. They've seen how SaaS has made it easier for us to get cloud applications without having to build up servers or go through months of setup time. Infrastructure as a service makes it possible to rent servers and storage. And we're now living in a world of cybercrime or crimeware as a service, where the cyber criminals and the bad actors are taking advantage of these same efficiencies. In terms of the cyber criminal organizations, we've really moved away from this old model of centralized hacker organizations that had to build everything from scratch, set up their own infrastructure, source the vulnerabilities, and really spend all the resources to build up the attacks, which means that they had to spend it on large targets, versus today's distributed world where there are vendors that are cybercriminal software and infrastructure and service vendors. There's cybercriminals who are specializing in different parts of the attack or different tools, and a lot more access at lower cost, which means that the attackers are going after smaller and smaller targets. When I say that cybercriminal is an ecosystem and a full-on economy, it really means that they have job postings, anonymous payment systems, where of course Bitcoin is the most famous one, but WebMoney, Perfect Money, and other systems that enable commerce to occur among the cybercriminals. And of course marketplaces, where cybercriminals can sell tools to one another or offer their wares as a service. What this really means is that SMBs are being targeted more than ever. According to a study by Symantec, in 2013, 41% of attacks were against small and medium-sized businesses, and the number is only going up. And from the Verizon breach report, SMBs are 15 times more likely to be breached than larger or small organizations. So let's talk about what the bad actors are actually doing, and we'll start off with the first stage of attack, which is getting that initial infection in. I'm sure many of you have seen, the old school scammy emails that look like, a 4-year-old wrote it. But what's really changed is that emails are becoming higher quality and more finely tuned to SMBs. When we look at this email, we can see that it's actually coming from Feed or FeedEx.com, not the real FedEx, but to somebody who's trying to get their job done. Maybe front desk receptionist who just shipped the most important documents that the company's sent out, that big proposal, or the AT&T voicemail message, where I've heard of people who don't have AT&T on their cell phones or AT&T in the office getting this, and basically feeling like they have to click the link because it's somebody they associate as their SMB vendor, and it could be something that's impacting their business. So the takeaway here is that the emails are getting better, which means we need to be more vigilant and employ additional layers of protection. At the same time, the bad actors are also getting more sophisticated with malvertising. And malvertising is a tactic where the bad actors either use stolen credit cards or they'll set up a dummy company that will then go out and buy ad space on mainstream legitimate ad networks, Yahoo, AOL, Google, you name it. And now they're running ads that seem legitimate on normal websites like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. But when the user clicks on that ad, they're being redirected to a site that is then going to infect the user with malware. One of the clever things that the bad actors are doing is they're not writing their own creative, they're actually stealing ads from legitimate companies, but when they run these ads, when you click on that link, it actually goes to a drive-by download site with an exploit kit. So it's no longer just that, people that go on porn sites or gambling sites, that they're the ones getting into trouble. It's now become part of the day-to-day internet experience. And earlier on, I mentioned this term exploit kit and drive-by download. And what's interesting here is that there's a ton of these kits coming online and available commercially where you can pay for as little as $200 for short-term subscription and then get a plug and play little piece of code. My mother could set this up where now the website that you're going to is actually going to go through all of those Java and Flash and PDF exploits and basically try to push malware onto the computer. And as the bad actor, I don't need to know any of this technical stuff. I just need to pay a small subscription and I get all of these attacks that are coming through. And not only that, but I'm also getting really good reporting. If I find out that the reporting is showing me that my malware infection business isn't doing as well as I want it to, there's even in-app purchases with new exploits that I can make my infection website more effective. All of this is part of that ecosystem that I was talking about where cybercriminals are creating these exploit kits, these plug and play tools that are really easy to use. The reports, let's face it, they look better than some of the business tools that I've used in the past. And it means that somebody who's just starting out in cybercrime or doesn't want to deal with everything doesn't have to do a whole lot of studying. They can just plug and play and go. Another interesting step is that's more of an intermediate step is the dropper malware. And this is both a tactic and a business model. So a dropper is basically a piece of commodity malware that somebody gets onto a computer and then it sits there quietly. It's not the flashy, noisy malware. It's not really slowing down your computer or anything. But now that the bad actor has that dropper on your machine, they are going to sell or rent the rights to infect your computer to another criminal. So you see what's happening here. There's this kind of disambiguation, this separation and distribution of responsibilities. And somebody who's just really good at infecting can do the infections and then sell the final payload infection rights to somebody else. And somebody who has malware that's going to be monetized can buy those infection rights. And in terms of what the bad actors are getting, once they install the dropper on your machine, they get an inventory of the operating system, the country, the performance of your machine, whether it's online a lot. So, for example, if I was a bad guy who wanted to send a whole lot of spam out, then I'd be wanting to buy infection rights to machine with the highest performance and highest online time, as opposed to ransomware or banking trojans looking for computers in the United States that are desktops and not servers, etc. And with this data, the business model is thriving, and you can even see that it even shows the antivirus that it's installed on the machine in case that matters to the person who's selling or buying. The business model is real, and this is an actually pretty interesting forum post where somebody did too good of a job installing their dropper on computers, and they're having a closeout sale. $60 in WMZ, which means web money equivalent, for 1,000 machines to be infected. You pay and they start running the new malware within 10 minutes. And there's even honor among thieves where they say, besides your malware and my grabber, nothing else will be installed and it'll continue to run. So that brings us to the next point, which is the actual malware payload. And when we talk about malware, of course, there's lots of things that come to mind, but the one that I think is probably most impactful are the financial fraud Trojan spyware keyloggers. SpyEye is an interesting example. It's a particular keylogger that was being sold, and basically it can scrape credit card numbers and even do things like making sure that it only grabs credit card numbers with the CVV and ones with certain expiration dates, bank account logins, WordPress site logins, etc. And one of the reasons this is so interesting is because the author of Spy is one of the very, very few that actually did get caught, which means that we have data. And the data shows that the author sold SpyEye for $1,000 to $8,500 pop, had 150 customers. So you can see that the software writer made a significant amount of money, and at the same time, it was still affordable for cyber criminals to buy SpyEye. And he's even got a testimonial where Soldier here reports making $3.2 million from financial fraud using the malware. This is just one piece of malware, but this one piece was used on 10,000 bank accounts. And when we look at what happens with those bank accounts, SMBs are being breached and having money stolen out of their bank accounts every day. But it's not making the headline news. It's not Target or Home Depot. It's small businesses. But, if a building supply company loses $150,000, well, that's probably their payroll, not just money that they have laying around. By the way that the bad actors actually pull the money out is they don't make one $150,000 wire transfer. That would probably trigger some bank alerts. But instead what they do is they hire people who do, to work from home, quote unquote, fulfilling orders, the work from home scams that you see ads for. And then on the day before payroll, what they do is they have all of these people start making small or medium odd dollar amount wire transfers to a US bank account, and then somebody else instantly transfers that money out to an offshore bank account to where it can't be taken back. And this is happening all the time, and of course is hugely impactful to SMBs. But what about downtime and data theft? And that's where ransomware comes in. Started off with CryptoLocker, but now there's many, many variants. And what ransomware does is it comes in using an email or an exploit kit, or malvertising and droppers are becoming more and more common. But once it gets installed, it phones home to a command and control server to get an encryption key, and then proceeds to encrypt local and network shares with military-grade encryption, and finally prompts the end user saying, within 72 hours you must pay me anywhere from $300 to $700 in order to get access to your data back. Otherwise, we're going to permanently leave it encrypted and you'll never be able to get it back, which is a pretty scary tactic, and even bringing data back up from backups can be painful, because oftentimes the process of encrypting the data can take multiple days, which means that you now have to fish around for the files that were on, from the specific days where they were still good. So next question that oftentimes comes up is, well, why aren't antivirus and firewalls, traditional signature-based and heuristic-based tools keeping up? Well, the analysts have been talking about these tools only being, 30 to 50% effective for years. But a great example is this classification of tools called cryptors. And if you want, when you get back to your desk, you can actually Google cryptors and see what they look like. But it's a tool that advertises bypassing 35 antiviruses and oftentimes firewalls and UTMs as well in under 3 minutes. And they claim legitimacy by saying that legit software authors don't want their software to be caught as a false positive, so use our tool to make sure that your software doesn't get flagged by the security tools. In a nutshell, you take your executable, your malware or virus or whatever it is, or run it through here, and what it does is it encrypts portions of the file, injects junk code and junk data, moves where the resources are being stored so it doesn't get picked up by heuristics, and then tests it against the most common and most popular antiviruses and firewalls. And guess what? If it turns out that it's still getting caught, then it'll just run again and again and again. It's not the smartest piece of technology, but it is very effective. And it's also very cheap. where a starting point for a crypto would be $50 for a 6 month subscription. I don't know about you guys, but I would go for the $150 Elite Pack, which includes multiple engines and premium support, because it's really important when you're a cyber criminal on the go. But in reality, when you think about the economics of paying $150 for a year's worth of 0-day undetectable threats, it's a really low cost when just one encryption will double your money. The other thing that the bad actors are doing that's really interesting is they're targeting the weakest links in the supply chain. So I don't know if any of you have large enterprise customers, but all of these most popular breaches weren't through the front door trying to attack Target or Home Depot or Neiman Marcus. It was through a small business supplier to the main company being breached. Target is a prime example of this, where Fazio Mechanical Services, which is a refrigeration repair company under 100 employees, small business that just happens to have access to the billing system of Target because they need to invoice Target, but they were targeted with an email attack, got infected. They were only running a free really kind of consumery security tool, and then they were breached, which then meant the attackers could pivot onto Target as a whole, and that turned out to be one of the biggest breaches in history. This letter, the statement on the Target data breach, sits on the Fazio Mechanical Services website and will continue to be there probably for years. And the impact of this is that everybody in security knows their name, and when you Google Fazio Mechanical Service to see if you should hire them, this will come up, as well as lots of news stories that are probably going to discourage prospects from doing business with them. Whether it's risk to your business's reputation, finances gone awry, or downtime, the impact of a breach is tremendous. And according to the National Cybersecurity Alliance, 60% of small firms will go out of business within 6 months of a data breach. So what do we do to protect you? How do we make sure that you're safe in this really scary threatscape? Well, for one, it's preventing malware infections, where we protect users across the full infection chain. That includes all of those stages of attacks, not just looking for a specific executable or signature that you can get around with a cryptor. It's blocking sites with those exploit kits at the network layer, and doing so whether it's the whole site or an embedded ad, protecting users from phishing attacks and the malicious links that come in emails and apps, because the browser really isn't the only path of infection anymore. The other part is containment, which is what I would call the new prevention. Prevent the droppers from getting that final stage of malware, so stopping the actually damaging part of the attack from taking place, stopping the spyware and keyloggers from uploading data, and preventing ransomware from getting the encryption key. And lastly, while the machine is being contained and the infection is halted, it's having an alert come to us, your service provider, so that our team can respond and actually do the cleanup on the machine before any damage is caused, as opposed to after the fact. One of the tools that we've introduced in our managed security service is cloud-delivered security, which is run off a predictive engine. This predictive intelligence is based on looking at 70 billion DNS queries per day, which is a little over 1 in 50 computers connected to the internet, and running it through automations and real-time analytics to block the threats at the network layer. Our security intelligence comes from ingesting millions of data points per second and running it through multiple types of algorithmic learning machines and AI classifiers to find the malicious sites and block them before users can access it and get the malware on their machines. When we talk about security, it's really about a layered approach, and we like to use the analogy of bulletproof glass. A 2-inch thick piece of automotive glass isn't going to stop a bullet. whereas bulletproof glass, which uses different materials sandwiched together and installed correctly, is going to stop that bullet because of those multiple layers effect and because it's installed properly. In terms of our security service, we protect users with email security, endpoint antivirus, firewalls, and network layer security service, which is that outer predictive layer of protection, and of course training and policy to protect the users. Common security challenges today are protecting users off the network, because you just saw that firewalls don't really protect you off the network, while avoiding expensive and complex appliances that can also hurt performance. According to Gartner, 30% of SMBs will be moving to cloud security in 2015, and we are ahead of the curve. We've been doing this for several years now, and we deliver what is called cloud delivered predictive security, which in a nutshell prevents malware from getting onto your machine, contains botnets, and also makes it possible to block phishing attempts and inappropriate content. It's trusted by SMBs and large businesses worldwide, and can make a significant difference in decreasing your chance of infection and breach.